Looks good, Dr. Pathak. Just unmute it and then start your presentation.
Sorry, Professor, is it visible?
Yeah, it's very visible, very good. And then you are also audible. So perfect. Let's keep going.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Krishna, for providing this wonderful opportunity to me to be here in this webinar series. I think it started last January, and most of the presentation, I'm present in most of the webinar series. If not, then I've thoroughly watched this YouTube channel. I think it's a very good resources for the practitioner and the researchers. I think you have done a very great job, and thank you very much, the Professor Krishna again, and the participant. And today's my presentation is not too technical. I'm going to a little bit general presentation, but and not too much like in the field of like geotechnical and in geoenvironmental sector, but like general types of solid waste management sectors, and how the integrated solid waste management is planned and successfully implemented. What are the different problems and issues in a developing country, and because of these, the projects are not successfully implemented last over the 30 years or more than the 3 decades. Yeah, and I'm going to focus this on some case studies and some examples, especially from the Nepal example, and including some other like developing countries issues. First, I'm going to start some background. Yeah, I think after COVID, the people are very aware about this waste management, but it doesn't mean that before COVID we have done good job and there is no negative impact of the waste management. You can see here some background information. Just the world generate over 2 billion metric tons of municipal solid waste worldwide, and which will be increased by 70% by 2050. This is the World Bank's 2018 report say. Similarly, cities in low-income countries are spending about 20% of their budget on waste management, but 90% of the waste in the low-income countries still open dump and then burn. And before then COVID, around 1 million deaths annually in developing countries due to the poor waste management. And in terms of the greenhouse gas emission, around 5% of the global greenhouse gas emission, primarily methane from inadequately disposed this organic waste, especially is happening in a developing and underdeveloped country. And around 15 million informal workers globally working in these waste management sectors in unhealthy condition with no social protection for their livelihoods before in the COVID situation. Now, what is the difference after the COVID situation? That is some differences we found after the COVID. For example, the people who are already risk, especially the solid waste management workers and the informal sectors involved for waste management, especially for their livelihood, there was in the risk before the COVID, but this is increased, this highly unsafe working condition during this COVID situation. This is the first point. And the second point, the waste production is shifted. That means before the COVID, like there are no lockdowns, and the industrial and commercial sectors are very vibrant and very vibrant, and as a result, the industrial and commercial sectors generate more waste. But due to the lockdown and others, the restriction in the movement, now the waste production is shifting from the industrial commercial sources to the residential, and too much increase in the healthcare waste. Some of the example you can see, you can read the different articles. For example, in Wuhan, in China, around 600% healthcare waste increase after this COVID-19. Yeah? And the next case is like changing in waste management practices also. For example, even the collection, transportation, And before the COVID, the people are talking about the recycling, but after the COVID, because of this fear of contamination, the people are not ready to separate the waste, for especially for recycling, and the recycling reduced drastically during in this period, and similarly the disposal at landfill has increased. Even the developing country, it was almost 80 to 90% before in pandemic situation, but is right now almost in 100% is happened in the disposal side. And the burning of waste is increased, and the use of single-use plastic is increased, because before COVID, when you are talking about the banning of plastic and decreasing of the plastic or something like that, because of the increase in PPE, there are several, the plastic program has been increased after the COVID, and the increased healthcare and social protection costs related to COVID-19 in the local government have created a challenge in waste management, because in developing country, the local government are already struggling for the waste management in the normal situation. But right now, the fund is shifted, and as a result, the situation have further worsened. Yeah, this is some of the example. You can see how the waste is dumped and waste is managed in the developing countries, especially. For example, you can see here some the landfill is constructed, very well operated, well designed landfill, but after later then, because of the poor operation, it has increased, because it is converted to the the dump site. This is the real situation. This is what happening in Kathmandu, Nepal. Yeah, and that's why today is talking related to how for the sustainable solid waste management, how the planning is done, what are the essential steps of the planning, and how this planning is translated to the real implementation of the project, and what are the different issues and challenges or problems this planning, whatever be the quality of the planning, they are not implemented successfully in developing country. I think this is the one planning cycles, what you do generally for any project, including the waste management. First, that we know what is the current situation, is a baseline, is very important. I found most of the project is failed because of not a planning, but because of the use of the poor or fabricated or such type of the data in the planning process. That's why this is to find the baseline situation is very important. And the next things, there are several steps. What is the problems, and in this, what is this the guiding principle for the integrated solid waste management? What are the different alternatives and options and the technology, and similarly how they successfully implemented for the to complete the cycle. I'm talking about the cycles in today's presentation, and start from the data. Yeah, this is the background information. What is the real picture in the municipality of Nepal? This is one of the example. The similar pattern of the waste generation, like waste composition and collection efficiency, is happening in the other cities of the developing country also. In Nepal, we have 293 municipality where more than 19 million people live here. And around this 293 municipality generate around about 6,000 tons per day. And among them, 60 to 65% is of biodegradable waste, is organic waste. This is a very common for the other cities of the other developing country also. And the recyclable is around 15 to 25%, and the others are the disposable waste. This is the scenario of this waste generation in the municipality of Nepal. Now, I want to go further. What are the key issues and the problems? The way this good plan is not implemented successfully. The first, I already mentioned, the problem is the baseline data. What is the real? We never, identify what is the real scenario right now. What is the ground situation right now? And as a result, then what we say, especially in the information system, for example, if your input is garbage, your output is also garbage. For example, this is in planning process also, the data is the fuel of the planning. And if if your input data is like fabricated or like there is no data, and if you use the manipulated data, then of course your project is not implementable. And this is generally happen in the developing country, yeah, because we don't know what is the different types of the waste, what are the different sources of the waste, what is the generation rate, what is the different like properties, like chemical properties, physical properties, like in or the calorific value and mechanical properties of the waste. And without finding this information, we start to design the project based on the assumption and some data from the other cases, and finally the project will fail. Yeah, I want to say some of the examples. Yeah, what we have done in the different municipality during the study. The first start from the sampling design. The problem start from the sampling design for the like a solid waste management baseline study. I found in the many like in many projects or many researchers, conduct the solid waste generation and composition study, but statistically the sample size is fine. This is it's valid for in the view of the statistical point of view. But for example, you can see here there's one of the example. Yeah, this is the example of one of the municipalities in Nepal. When you sample, your sample size is, the 5%, 95% confidence level with the 5% margin of errors, and everything is fine. But when your sample is, you select sample from rural natures of the city, for example. In developing country, for example, in developed country, you say the municipality means the urban area. This 100% is the urban area, but it is not, true for the many cities for the developing country. That means you say the municipality, but the urban characteristics is very low. It's very minimum, but the most of the area are the rural in natures, and their this consumption patterns and the degree of the expenditure level and people's waste generation capacity, the different. That's why when you sample this area only from the rural area, then you find this per capita waste generation is around 70 grams. Sometimes the people conduct the survey only in urban cluster. And they found, for example, in this particular case, when you sample from this urban area, then you found the 200 grams per person per day. And finally, we use this data to calculate the total solid waste of the whole municipality. For example, if the city have the 50,000 population, if you use this value and we calculate the total amount of waste is only 4 tons, less than 3.5 tons. But when you use this value to calculate the whole municipality's waste, you will get 10 tons per day. Then what will happen, if you design based on this 3.5 ton or based on this 10 ton, when you project for next 15 years or 20 years, then what will be the consequences of these such types of the project? That's why this is one of the problems that I found in the project. Yeah, and another cases, in many cases, people start the survey based on the interview. For example, just one of the example you can find here. When you ask the people about the amount of the waste, the people say, based on the people's perception, their respondent information, that the per capita waste generation is around 360 grams per day. But when in the actual measurement, it was only 126. But the homogeneous materials with the density, the people can estimate more accurately. But the size is different for the mixed waste. And that's why their estimation is, for the such a type of heterogeneous material in terms of size, their estimation is, really doesn't reflect the real value. And therefore, the main study is, based on the such type of the interview survey, whatever with the sample size and wherever with the samples, sampling you have done, but the value is not real. And then finally, you will get for example, if you design the, like a landfill site or like the composting facilities, and either is the under capacity or the over capacity. Finally, it doesn't work. And another case, we would, for example, for the selection of the technology or for importing the technology from the other parts of the world, we never say what is the characteristics of the West and what is the culture and behavior of the people in the particular city, the particular country. And finally we will fail. For example, I want to give another example here, how the people's income level and the people's income expenditure level or people's like urbanization patterns vary the West generation or something like. And you can see here this area, this part is the West, the municipal solid waste generation per capita for low income country, but this is for the high income country. That's why the generation is depend on the people's income level and their then expenditure level also. And just we found the similar cases here in Nepal and different cities. I think that's why when you design the project, it depends on, you vary from city to city. For example, is one of the example here. You see, if the people's the expenditure level is less than $5, the generation per capita per household generation is very low as compared to the $40. When the people's expenditure is around $40, like $400, then their amount of generation is almost double. That's why it depends on people's income or expenditure level, how the waste is, per capita waste generation vary. It's a very important factor have to be considered during the design of the solid waste management project. And another things, this is very important, the degree of urbanization. Yeah, for example, for all cities or area, the same technology doesn't work. The same approach doesn't work. That means the problem is common for each city, for every country. The solid waste management or solid waste problem is common, but it doesn't mean that the solution is common. It differs from country to country, different from city to city within the country. For example, you say here like this is the rural area and this is the urban area. Based on this degree of urbanization, the people's per unit waste generation rate is different. Similarly, the composition pattern is different also later. And even it depends also in the climatic condition also. For example, is the case from Nepal. When you go like in the southern part of the Nepal, where the area plain and the temperature is very high, and the cities are highly populated, and the city are generated more per capita waste generation in such city is higher as compared to the mountain area. And based on this, then the solution, sometimes the centralized waste management solution works for the big cities or the highly populated, highly urbanized cities, or sometimes decentralized solution work for the scattered or low populated area or low urbanized area. And this is another example. This is a global example. You can see here how the waste composition is different from country to country, depending upon their income or expenditure level. For example, this is the global average from the low income country, and this is global average from high income country. Here you can see here the organic material, like the biodegradable material, around 53%, but here for 34%. And for the high income country, the materials with calorific value is very high. That's why like some incineration and the waste to energy from the mixed waste, this types of technology work perfectly, because the materials, like the wet materials is very low, and the dry materials with high calorific value, such types of fraction is high. But if you import these types of the technology from where it's very successful in the developed country or high income country, I think it doesn't work for the country with such type of waste composition. That's why I think it varies from city to city within the country. I want to show here in the case from Nepal. You can see here, this is the case of South Asia region. I think the pattern of these solid waste fractions is almost common, especially for the region-wise, either in India or Nepal and Bangladesh, either in Pakistan. The pattern is almost similar. That's why the system, what works in India, it may work from Nepal also, because in terms of cultural and or the economic status and others, like even the waste composition pattern seems similar, but it's different in terms of, but in region-wise, in a general term, you can utilize the technology for the region-wise, but within the country, there is some variation with respect to the degree of urbanization. For example, this is the case from the Nepal in both cases. This case is from highly urbanized cities, and this is the low urbanized cities. You can find here the organic part is lower in the urbanized area and higher in the like a rural area. And that means that's why the technology is different for this area and this area within the country. I think this is very important for selection of the technology. And the next things, I think this is not a very common, the research and the data generation is not very common in developing country people, because they don't like to, they have no idea about, or they don't like to invest in database on in research, either the government or even in university level, and such type of research is very rare. And as a result, we use the old data, but the publication we will do in publication, we in the good report in like 2020, but the data is used, this is the primary data is by 2020, like 2010 or 2012, and almost 8 years or 10 years back, data is used for the new publication. That means it doesn't work. Just I want to show one of the example for one of the city in Nepal. The percentage of the plastic in 2012 is only 12%. After 8 to 9 years, 8 years in 2020, the plastic has been increased from 12% to the 17%. At that time, in the household waste, like this diaper, the percentage of the diaper is almost negligible. There is no diaper in 8 years back in the municipal, household waste. But after 8 years, the percentage of the diaper in the municipal, this household waste is around 5%. That is significantly changes in the waste composition. And as a result, when we use like 5 to 10 years back data to design the current project, then ultimately it doesn't work. That's why it's very important to update the data regularly, and as a result we can get we'll implement the project very successfully. Otherwise, finally the project will fail, whatever be your quality of the plant. And another things, especially in the cities of the developing country, at the point of these sources, the pattern, the fraction of the organic, one of the example here, you can see here, the fraction of the organic waste at source and at the transfer station, and finally at the disposal site. That means the region is always is not collected. Even in collected, there are a lot of like informal sectors are working here. For example, for developed country, in the city of developed country, everything is formalized, and whatever you generate go to the either the processing site and the disposal site, depending upon the type of the waste management facility. But especially in a developing country, the role of the informal sectors is very crucial in terms of solid waste management and in terms of the recovery and the recycle. And another point here, I think that for organic recycling is not common in developing countries. It's very problematic. For example, other recyclable material, dry materials are almost more than 60 to 70% is recovered from the sources through the informal sector, but the organic waste is not without any like formal system or the municipal or government effort, this is not recycled. But this study was conducted in the last lockdowns, this situation and COVID-19 situation. And during this lockdown period, people's in Kathmandu, this is the example of this Kathmandu city's waste. Why this organic waste is significantly decreased when it reaches to the landfill site, if they collected almost 90 to 100%. That means one of the reason is during this lockdown after the COVID pandemic, the people have started this household composting and rooftop gardening. This a lot of the people have invested their time to do for such types of activities, and the significant amount of the organic waste is decreased in the sources. This is one of the reasons. But for example, whether like plastic or textiles seems higher in landfill than sources. That means the study was conducted only in the residential area, and assuming that at that time all the commercial institutional are locked. But the hospitals and other some commercial facilities are open, and this legally or illegally, this plastic and other different materials from the healthcare facility and other some commercial facility were open is finally goes to the landfill because the healthcare facility are not able to manage the waste within their system. That's the reason this plastic or textiles or like single-use plastic has increased more than higher than sources. It may be the reason, and that's why it's very. I'm talking about why. That's why when you design your landfill site based on the sampling in the source, I think that the figure may be the different, because this figure indicate that the waste is different in at the source, and as compared to the either in transportation, and several times there's a multiple handling is happening in developing country. The people throw the street, and the municipal sweepers collect the waste from the street and collect from street to the transfer station, and finally goes to the landfill site, and the scavenging and other informal recovery and collection is happening in a different point at a different source at a different station, and finally the amount of the fraction of the waste at the final the disposal site is completely different than what generated at the sources. And that's what the conclusion based on this is the data is the fuel of any planning and the implementation of any project. And accurate solid waste generation data is very important for design of any integrated solid waste management infrastructure. Size of city, degree of urbanization are the very important factors for designing either centralized or decentralized solution. Or change in consumption behavior, urbanization pattern significantly changes the solid waste fraction. And the solid waste characterization like composition, calorific value, and contamination is very crucial for the selection of the treatment and disposal technique. And the mechanical properties of the fresh and wall waste are important for stability analysis of the landfill and design of land. This is I think this is almost missing, especially in the developing country. At least the composition survey will done in any project, but even in large landfill site project, they will design based on some assumption, because this the identification of these mechanical properties of the fresh and wall waste is almost not happening here, at least in Nepal. And there's a similar case in any other developing country also. Finally, you can see, you can hear a lot of example of the failure of the dump site in the different part of the world in the developing country. And another issue after the data, in my understanding, the first is we have not research, we have not accurate and precise data to use the good planning, and finally, whatever be your planning, then the project is not implemented because of this poor and fabricated or manipulated data. And the second is the perception and the people's understanding, because the waste generator are the people here. That's why if it depends on the people's behavior, how the project is a success or how the project is designed. It depends on, it's not only the technology, it not depend only in the finance, it doesn't depend only in data, but it depends on the people's culture and behavior and their, and that's why it's a very important case. That's one of the example here. The people's. I'm just trying to show here the one case I found somewhere, and like this perception versus behavior. People understand everything about this waste because what is the adverse or negative impact of the waste, how it managed, they know. But that means this is the perception. Their perception is right, but finally it is not translated to the behavior. And finally, the same person will start, throw the waste in some particular point that is very clean at early morning, and other people are following his path. And finally, when you back to the home from the same places, the same place, then finally you see, or see that this is the waste pile that was not in early morning, but it started from early morning because of he never knows, he started to throw the waste at first, and he started to blame to the city government and the other people's, the city is dirty, the government is not doing nothing, and something like this is the people's behavior. This is especially happening for all the city of the developing country. That means they understand the waste have to be managed or have to be thrown somewhere, but not in their locality or in their area. That is the one of the third, the understanding. Because of these reasons, the people, the waste is not managed properly in the cities of developing country. Because the first thought is people think this is the resources. The people, they say waste is the resources. Bring one bag of the waste, I'll give you one bag of the dollar or one bag of the money. But it doesn't mean that the waste is the resources, but it doesn't mean this one bag of the waste is equivalent to the one bag of the money. This is the services have to be provided by the city government, but it can be managed without investing the cost resources from the other infrastructures by utilizing the service charges or some revenue from the proper waste management. They can manage it, but it doesn't mean that it is money or the waste is the 100%. You can convert the waste to the money, and it's this is very commercial or benefited project in terms of monetary value. And the second, third is waste is waste and is dumped somewhere, but not in my backyard. This is the NIMBY effect. These are the many people think like that, and they say we have already paid taxes to the municipal government, and all right, you can throw somewhere because the municipality's job is to collect the waste and manage somewhere. This is their job. This is not our duty. They never think this is our duty. I mean, we are not following the polluter pays principle. If we pollute or we generate the waste, then we have to manage ourselves. It's not only applicable for the institution, it's applicable for the single people also. Yeah, but we never realize these things. That means we understand they had the adverse impact, and we have to manage. That's why we throw it somewhere outside from our locality, our places. That means we understand. That means we perceive it, but our behavior is not to change. Yeah, that's the NIMBY syndrome, and solid waste not recognized as the urban infrastructure. For example, municipal government never recognize this infrastructure like water supply, road, and drainage, and they have not budget for the investment. There is no investment in infrastructure, but they only do the day-to-day operation. That means this is the crisis management. What is doing here in the cities of the developing country? Without any investment in infrastructure, then how do you do this operation in appropriate way? And this is the problem. And another things we can we talk more, and that is no action. That means not action and talking only behavior. It happens for the municipal planner or a manager, even the local peoples, and everyone know about what is waste and how it is managed, but they never translate in their action. This is another problem. And that means people's perception should be changed to the people's behavior if you want to implement your plan successful way. And another is you have to change this NIMBY to the IMBY. Yes, in my backyard, otherwise it is not work. And because the identification of the land for any waste management project is very, the crucial for any local government for the in the cities of the developing country, and change talking behavior to the action before talking only behavior, because we have to do, first we have to do action and then talk. But especially in the developing country, or our politician or the bureaucrat or the manager or planner do only they enjoy in talking rather than action. That is another problem, especially for the waste management. And the solid waste is not recognized as a urban infrastructure. That means there is no plan, there is no project, there is no investment in infrastructure, and finally, without infrastructure, you can't do the good operation. Yeah, and finally, we have to shift this paradigm, shift it, collect and dump to the integrated solid waste management approach. The next issues I'm talking about this selection of the technology. I've seen it because there are other many cases, but this is a bit old cases, but you can find here other cases from different city of the a country, either in South Asia, Africa, and in South America. One thing is, this imported technology, how this wrong selection of the technology fell, and we especially in the developing country. The one example is, you can see like 2003 case is this India's cities case, like Lucknow Municipal Corporation. They have designed the anaerobic digestion plant, that is 5 megawatt waste to energy, to process 500 to 600 ton municipal waste per day with 18 million US dollar at that time by the private company of Europe and Singapore. And finally, the project is not able to operate even in single days full capacity due to the high level of inert materials and waste, and it was closed down later. The similar cases happened in 3 years back in Kathmandu, Nepal, and the European Union supported the 3-ton waste to energy plant in Kathmandu. They are inaugurated in 2017, but after some weeks it's closed. And many waste to energy plants to process mixed municipal solid waste had to be closed down in many developing countries due to the reason is very low heating value and high percentage of the inert materials. For example, I saw earlier in that, that the developing country have, this high percentage of the wet materials, like 60 to 65% is organic materials, and the inert materials is also high, 6 to 10%. But our assumption is, what the technologies, the provider says, assume that what is how the technologies work in either in Europe or in America, and exactly this technology work for the developing country. The reasons why they failed this, like in this waste to energy plant in Lucknow or in Kathmandu and other city of India and in Africa. The reason is, the first is local waste composition ignored, because the Austrian company or Singapore company assumed that the waste fraction is similar like that in Austria or in Singapore, because it's the different case for Indian town and Nepali town. Yeah. The next thing, the local practices and culture were not taken into the consideration. For example, in Europe, if your regulations say the segregation is mandatory at source, they will do it. Maybe 100% is not, it will happen, but at least 90 to 95% is happen, but it is not possible. It is not practice in the developing, in the cities of the developing country. Another things, normally the technology provider want to sell the technology. This is not a technical assistance. If there is a technical assistance, there is the customization in the technology. This happens, yeah, and that's why it works. Otherwise, if you sell the technology, it doesn't work. The same technology we work in Europe never work further. The cities of the developing country from South Asia or like in Africa or South America. This is the reason they fail this technology. Another example I want to say, like one of the example from the Egypt, in Cairo. In Cairo, there was a global contract and started the privatization of the waste, like from collection, transportation, and recycling. But at that city, but in the city, already the informal working are working in this like collection, transportation, and recycling, and they have with the minimum like service charges with the users. After global contract, the global contractors have the higher tariff, but the local people are not able to pay the higher amount of the tariff to the global contractors, whatever be the like government's regulation or something like it. And finally, the project was not implemented, and the contractor gave up the contract and asked for the huge compensation. And a similar case is happened in Nepal also. For example, in 2009, we have when project was initiated, integrated solid waste management of the Kathmandu Valley with the international investors, but it doesn't work. It is not started yet. The reason is there are several reasons. One is how to utilize these current informal sectors, or how does the current working force to the system. There are so many reasons. Then after 9, 10, or 11 years later, the project is not initiated. This is the reason. That means strong informal sectors was ignored. In the developing country, almost either in recovery or in collection, transportation, the informal sectors are very powerful, and they have contributed significantly in the waste management sector. So when you ignore these informal sectors, I think finally your project is not successful. Either like in PPP model, like private sector participation was just copy paste, is not adapted to the local condition. That's why it doesn't work. And finally, if your project is not technically feasible, I think it's not economically viable. Yeah, that's why it should be technically feasible as well as the economically viable. I want to show one of the example of how the good technology doesn't work if your design or construction is wrong. This is the simple how this composting, like this box composting work. This is one of the example from the Bangladesh. They have done very successfully such types of the composting in the Bangladesh. Initially the design was like that, but during the construction, they have made like that. They are talking, this is the composting, and that is in the composting, there's sufficient oxygen and air circulation should be there, but like the designer, the engineer have no idea about how the composting work. Yeah, and finally that was an anaerobic digestion process happened here, and there is an order, and the people blame the technology, and it doesn't work for our city, or it is not workable for us. That means if whatever be the technology, if you are not able to design properly or construct properly, even for operate properly, finally it doesn't work. Yeah, this is an example. That's why there is some conclusion based on the selection of the technology. You have to think about the people's behavior as well as the nature of the waste prior to the selection of the technology, and just don't say like don't do the copy and paste of the waste management technology, but you have to customize to it to maximize the recovery of resources. That means, for example, if the waste to energy work perfectly in Europe, if your waste is even in mixed, but it doesn't work in South Asia, it means the organic part of the calorific value is very low. If you customize the technology to increase the calorific value, using some technology for the pre-treatment to increase the calorific value, then you can use this same technology. But exactly what you use in Austria or Germany, it doesn't work here. That's why you have to customize to adapt the local condition. The second case. The third is the waste problem is common, but the solution is site specific. I already mentioned the city to city is different, and some cities decentralized solution work. For a highly urbanized area, centralized solution may be very effective. And sometimes, you say in science or in experiment in the university, something happens. For example, from plastic to fuel, the plastic and the petroleum product, and everyone know the fuel can be produced from the plastic. But in terms of the municipal management, plastic management, whether they are technically feasible or economically viable, these things is very important. That means if science says it happens, but in engineering or for the mayor of any cities, he knows he is, for example, for invention or for science, it happens, but when it happens, after 10 years or after 5 years, it is not important. But in engineering or for the city mayor, it is very important. It happens, it should be happen right now, and it should be technically feasible and economically viable also. That's why there are several technology and everything you can do. Such types of the language cannot be used, or such types of approach cannot be implemented in practical way. This is another thing. And scaling of the technology. For example, if you want to do a business from the West, of course, this technology have to be scaled up, and the centralized solution, it may be a right solution. If you want to participate, your community level participation, or you manage the waste from the active participation of the community or the local people, I think this decentralized solution will be work, and it will very common for the small cities. And another thing is the operation cost. If, especially in developing country, the city or the government don't care about operation cost, because the investment is supported by any development agency or even for the federal government, and they don't care about the investment. But the operation costs have to be borne by the city government, and at that time they will realize if the operation cost is very high, this is not affordable. That's why we have to be very careful about investment versus operation cost for the sustainability of any waste management project. And finally, now what is the way? What is the way forward for the sustainable? I want to try to finish 10 minutes, more 10 minutes. The first things now, based on this, the issues and problems, identification of the key issues and the problems, then the next you have to identify what is the long-term vision for the city, what is the planning period, what will be for the short time, or what will be for the long time or longer time period, and what is the guiding principle to achieve this sustainable solution. The first things, you have to follow these types of waste management hierarchy. For example, for a developing country, if the waste management hierarchy like prevention, minimization, reuse, recycling and recovery and landfill, I think it works. For example, you prefer from in this direction. For example, first you have to follow the prevention, then you try to minimize the waste, reuse the waste, and then recycle the waste, and recovery in the form of energy and other materials, and finally landfill is the least priority. But if you think like that, only in this waste management hierarchy, from prevention to the landfill in developing country, if you achieve this reuse, recycling, or minimization, even as per your optimum thinking, as per your target, but your city is never clean, that means currently you are doing open disposal, open dump. That I already mentioned, around 90% of the cities of the underdeveloped countries either open dump and then open burn. That means, if you follow this prevention, minimization, or use and this waste hierarchy, but if you are not improve your open dump to the landfill, your city is never clean. That's why for the city of the developing country, you have to follow this waste management hierarchy from prevention to the landfill. At the same time, you have to think first, your uncontrolled disposal have to be converted to the controlled disposal, and then this controlled disposal have to be phased out to the landfill. When you achieve this target, that means your collection is 100%, That means there is no open dump. Everything is disposed, at least in engineer landfill. Then your waste management hierarchy perfectly works. Otherwise, whatever be their achievement in reuse, recycling, or minimization or the recovery, if your practice is still, like 25% or 20% of the people of the cities is open throwing or openly burn, that means your city is not clean, or your waste management is not a environmental friendly, or is not a good for the public health. That's why you have to follow these types of the waste management hierarchy, especially for the city of the developing country. That means you in both directions you have to work. That's the point. Yeah. And next things, the polluters pay principle. That means for any waste management project, the solid waste management charge, the service charge, is the major sources of operation of the solid waste management facility. That's why this is a very key to you don't mix the service charge and the tax. They are the different thing. When you provide the service, when the city government or the private sector provide the service in the waste management sector, then you have to pay. Otherwise, you don't need to pay. That's why it is not a tax. Yeah, that's why if the city government or any private sectors assigned by the city governments provide the quality of service, then you have to pay as per their service. That is the point. That is the major sources of to operate any solid waste management facility. Another is the proximity principle. You have to manage your waste near at the point of source generation. And another is the extended producer response. Is very important, especially for like plastic and other materials. We are, environmentally and safe disposal of is also the manufacturer's responsibility also. Otherwise, some particular materials are not managed by any effort from the city governments and the peoples. And it's very important. This extended producer responsibility is one of the key fundamental principle of the waste management these days. And the next is the selection of the technology and option. Whether I already mentioned which technology is going to follow. Whether if you want to, your city is going to decompose, then you have to segregate the waste. This is the bottom line. Without segregation at source, it is not successfully implemented. The many composting projects, compost plant are failed in the developing country because of the mix of this contamination like glass or plastic and other contamination, as well as low quality of this nutrient value. That's why it's very important which technology you're going to adopt. Yeah, either in anaerobic digestion, or if you are going to recycle to the dry materials, then first you have to select the technology. Then which type of the option you are going to follow. For example, whether you the decentralized solution, in the many places of the same cities, you are going to invest for the small plant or centralized plant. I think I've already mentioned for the big cities, for highly urbanized cities, the land is the very crucial. The identification of the land is the very important for the any waste management facilities. And also, if you want to make the business or make the profitable, I think the centralized solution only help to do it. But for this case, the private sectors and the investment in infrastructures and the right technology is very important. And the second things, after the selection of the technology, then you have to follow this integrated solid waste management system. There are several components. I think in my understanding, integrated solid waste management system doesn't mean the only operational component from segregation to collection to the disposal. It doesn't mean, but in many developing countries, currently we are doing only collect and dump. We're not doing treatment and recovery at all. Just there is a recycle or recovery of material through the informal sector. That is not from the formal sector. Even in operational component, we are not following all these components. That's why if we include these all components together, that is the integrated solid waste management. But it's not a perfect again. Then to make the sustainable integrated solid waste management, there are other components like your regulation. For example, we are talking about the private sector participation, whether it is enable environment for the private sectors or not. Whether how the investment friendly, whether there is an investment friendly environment or not. This depends on this regulatory framework. The stakeholder participants, I already mentioned, the inclusion of informal sectors is very important, and the private sector's participation for the operation of the solid waste management is very crucial for the sustainability, and the institutional and financial arrangement is very important. If you add this component together with the operational component, then this is the perfect integrated solid waste management for the sustainability. And after then, you can start to the phase-wise improvement plan. You have to develop the phase-wise improvement plan. And I will make some example from some Nepalese cities. This is the one city in Nepal, and the two small cities are doing, in the path of this integrated solid waste management. For example, they are trying to segregate waste at shores. They have separate collection and transportation system, and the recyclable materials are sorted properly and sold to the recycle industry, and the degradable waste is composted. And from every household or every sources, they will collect the service charges to run their plant. And they also generate the revenue from selling the different product from the solid waste. And another example, for example, this is the case of Dankuta, one of the small municipality in Nepal. That earlier there is a dump site, and finally they clean, and the dump site is right now is converted to the very good, it's like garden, and that's why they have followed like the stepwise improvement from segregation collection to the final disposal, and they have achieved this integrated solid waste management, the way of this integrated solid waste management. I think that all the big municipalities of the follow the same path, and for the successful implementation of this in any solid waste management project. I think the scale of the project or scale of the technology or like the solution may be different, but the approach is the same. And this is another example. They have started to compost from the organic part. And I already mentioned this household level composting is very common in Kathmandu. And almost a significant amount of the organic waste has been recovered or utilized for this composting, for rooftop gardening and other organic farming in a major city of Nepal. Another, this informal sector, recognition of the informal sectors or formalizing of the informal sector is very crucial for the sustainable waste management in developing country. Without inclusion of these forces to the formal system, I think, as I mentioned earlier in the example of Cairo, we will repeat the same types of the problem for the city of the developing country also. And it's very important because currently almost all the recyclable material is recovered by the informal sectors in the cities of the many developing country. For example, this is one of the example in Kathmandu, Nepal, and just in the 3 years, like you can find here in 2005 there is only, for example, Kathmandu Valley generated around 1,000 tons per day, the total waste. Among them, around 20 to 30% the recyclable materials. And 2005, the recovery was 100 metric ton. It increased to the 140 metric ton in 2030 and increased to the 250 metric ton per day in 2017. This is not informal way. This is through the informal worker, informal sectors. That's why it's very important how the informal sector is, managing the waste and making the money from the waste. And another is the scaling of the technology. Yeah, it's very important. In Nepal also, for example, you can find in India or other city of the developing country, the waste to energy has become very popular. But I already mentioned, if you start to the waste to energy from the mixed waste based on the incineration and all the technology, what we have practiced in Europe and Japan, it doesn't work. But if you segregate the waste properly and if you manage this, biodegradable waste to the like biogas, and the biogas converted in the different form, and it could work perfectly in the business level, but the technology have to be scaled up and you have to invest more. And finally, this operational modality. Professor Krishna, I'll finish 5 minutes, fine?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, the next is the operation modality. Yeah, in a developing country, I've already mentioned the waste management is the priority, not a prior issue, like it's not a priority issue for any city, either municipal government or like even for federal system and federal government, because I already mentioned it's not recognized as infrastructures. There is no investment in the infrastructure, and just they are doing day-to-day operation only. And that's why this municipality provide, the first is the municipality operate modality. I think it is already failed modality. For example, municipality are not doing their job. This is the service have to be provided by the municipal government, but if they operate, it is not successful. I think in currently we're talking about the waste is resources. We're talking about collect dump policy to the resource recovery approach. If we follow this approach, then if the municipality are not able to this operate this such waste management facility imperfectly. The second modality is the in the first minute because they provide the lands, they develop the sites, and they operate the plant. Currently they are doing whatever be the technology, whatever be the either just they're collecting and dumping, but they have a land and they are operating right now. And the second option, municipality provide land and develop the site, or they provide some infrastructures for recovery and treatment facility also, including the landfill site. But the operation have to be contracted to the private sector and to operate the plant for a certain time period. And the third option is we're talking about the PPP model, like public-private partnership. It's not only private sector participation, but public-private partnership. That means municipality provide the land in the appropriate site based on the technology, but the private sector builds land and they operate, own, and finally, after a certain time, they will transfer to the municipal government. This is another modality. But for the developing country, I think the first is almost failed. Not only almost, this is the failed option, because the municipality are not able to handle this solid waste management properly in terms of management, in terms of resource recovery. And in the second modality, I think this is the development is a gradual process. That's why in the third modality, it's perfect, but in developing country, the people are not still understand what is the PPP model. I think the government thinks only about the benefit, but in the private sector, they never think about the risk. If you are talking about the PPP model, then the risk and benefit have to be shared by all parties. But in this, there is not such a good example, good practices for such types of the private sector. They build and they operate and they transfer to the technology later, after 15 or 20 years later. The reason is normally the contract time is a very minimum, because the municipal government want to contract for 1 year or 2 years for the infrastructure development or with the private sector. At that time, that's why the private sector are not ready to invest, because for 1 or 2 years or for the 5 years, it is not able to, they reach to this, to recover their investment. That's why, at least if you want to go the third option, you have to, even the private sector are ready for the investment, at least, third option require the higher investment and has a longer payback period. This is this is a problem. What is happening in the developing country means the city government want to make the contract for the very short period, maybe 3 years or 5 years. And for that period, the private sector are not ready to invest. The private sector, and another reason and another problem for this case is the private sector, they know the problem of the solid waste and they know that what technology work for what types of the waste, but they have for the investment. The private sector, those have the capacity and the investment, but they have no idea about how to make the business profitable in the solid waste sector. And that is the problem is happening in a developing country. And finally, we haven't either the municipal government or the private sector are successfully implemented this waste management project. But in conclusion, we have to start from the option 2. And if after a few years, when the private sector is ready and the municipality are also capable to monitor as a regulatory body to the private sector, and then we want to, we can go for the third option for the long-term sustainability. At that time, the private sector are ready and for the investment, and the municipality also ready, to monitor and to handle the project. And finally, what we have to think about the environmental benefit also, because not only in the greenhouse gas emission, there is other environment cost. For example, when you dump the waste somewhere, and you have to compensate in a different way to the local people because of your poor management. Therefore, the environment cost is not measured during the design of the project, not quantified, but it's a very huge, investment in terms of compensation, in terms of people's health, in terms of degradation of the environment, including water environment, air, and land. That's why it have to be very careful. You have to examine the environmental impact of the poor waste management during before the design of the project. And finally, we say, there is no resources for management of the solid waste with the government. This is one of the example, just we can say here, Kathmandu in 2018 and 2019 with 6.3 million budget for waste management. Their expenditure were, and the private sectors collect around 65% household in the Kathmandu. And if, based on $3 per month, from per household, this is a very minimum value, and the average value, they will collect 5.4 million. Ultimately, the total is around 12 million US dollar. Yeah. But if based on the different study, this operating cost for the waste management facility is around $35 to $50. And if based on this $35 per ton, then the cost is only 7.6 million. Because we have already 12 million resources already collected here, but 7 or 8 million is sufficient for the good waste management. But currently neither our city is clean nor the waste is recovered. That's why we have resources. We have sufficient resources to manage the waste in sustainable way, but we are not doing because of the problem I mentioned earlier. And finally, this is the conclusion. I'm not talking about this the recommendation. This is some points to be a success of the solid waste management project. The first thing, it depends on this political leadership, because it depends on cities, mayors, or like cities manager. Therefore, if they have a will or vision or confidence to solve the problem, they can start a good project. And solid waste should be recognized as urban infrastructure, because currently in a developing country, we are doing just the crisis management. This is not a management, because there is no investment in infrastructure, but we are doing just day-to-day operation. That means the collect and dump is a very easy way and a very cheap way to do it. And the second thing and third point is early step include the extending collection to the whole city. For example, if your collection is not 100%, whatever be the achievement in the resource recovery, your city is never clean. That's why the first is you have to collect your waste by 100%. And the second is phasing out the open dump. Whatever be the amount of the recovery, even 80% you recovered, but your 20% waste is going to the open dump. There is no changes in the environment and in the public health. Public's health. That's why it's very important. And after then, this is the first in the precondition, yeah. And after then, you have to follow this integrated solid waste management approach. That means resource recovery with mandatory segregation. Whatever with the technology, the segregation is very important. And the financial sustainability, that means solid waste service charge is very important to run your plant. And when you optimize the revenue generation, it's also support to to make the businessable, the profitable business in the solid waste sector. And another is this proactive participation of all stakeholders. For example, we are talking about the public-private partnership, but here the peoples are the waste generators. The service charge have to be paid by the people, and if you are not support from the producer, from the people, then the project is not able to succeed. You cannot make success the project. Yeah? You cannot make the project successful. Yeah, that means that's why I'm talking here the people, public, private partners. That means the people have to be actively participate in terms of like segregation for like tariff collection and other things. Yeah, and then the public and private sector can handle the project in an effective way. The next is the establishment of the material recovery facility in collaboration with community, private sectors, and informal sector. That means informal sectors have to be included in the any formal solid waste management sector, in at least in current cases of any cities of the developing country, if you want to make your project is successful. And next is the scaling of the technology and providing the opportunity to set a recycle industry. For example, you are talking about the recycling and just trading of the recycled material, and you have no recycle industry, that means no end solution in your country. What will happen? For example, you can just see some example, what happened when the China banned the plastic from Europe, America, and Japan, and even other East Asian countries are following the same path. That's why if you have not a recycle industry, then you are just trading the recycled materials only. Then finally, if as per fundamental principle of the waste management, you can't transport the waste from one country to another, then finally what will happen? Then your recycling is just become a campaign, is not the solution. That's why the establishment or making the environment for the recycle industry is very important for the sustainable solution. And the imperfect copy of waste management technology may not work. For example, what technology works perfectly for America, it doesn't work for Nepal or India, because the waste is different, the people's behavior is different, but you have to customize the solution, to customize the technology, to make the site-specific solution. And one of the important things, education and enforcement of law. In some country, the enforcement of law it works perfectly, but in some way, the education works perfectly. But some countries, we were enjoying in the democracy, but they are just, the anarchism is higher, and at that point, you have to follow the same both education and enforcement of law together. And at that time, it works perfectly. Okay, thank you very much. And finally, I want to share these photographs. These photographs is, this is the way of the, I took this photograph in 2011. This city is this is the small city.
Go back one slide.
Okay, this is the around 4,000 meter altitude. This we call Namche Bazaar. This is the gateway of this Mount Everest. Yeah, this is Namche Bazaar. It's the altitude around 4,000 meters, and they're very beautiful and very clean. And but just in 2-minute walking distance, you can find here several dump sites here. That's why this dump site is not because of these local people. Yeah, because the several thousand people go for the Mount Everest. They want to, reach at the peak of the Mount Everest, and the people go with the metro. This for example, we land to the Kathmandu airport, then they start to that every foreigner, start to teach how to make the city clean, till the reach of this Mount Everest, they will follow the same instruction or same teaching. But when they reach at the top of the Mount Everest, they forget their responsibility, and finally they left all the materials they have, brought. And but in legally, they have to return back all this used material to the concerned authority, and then the authority have to manage the waste properly. But because of this, everyone from all over the world, not because of the local people here. For example, the Kathmandu or New Delhi is very dirty or something like that. The city is not clean because of the local people. Yeah, they are not following the waste management, what I talked earlier. But this is because of the global people. Yeah, this is all over the world, and local people are not responsible for here. And then our mountain is just converted to the dump site, including the Mount Everest. Yeah, that's why it's a very important. And this is I request to all my international friend, your responsibility start from today. Then you have to teach then how to make this, this mountain is beautiful, and this is the very important for us. This is the global problem, yeah. And the solution for the solution, the local people are not able to do it, solve this problem. That's why we people have to be helped to make our Himalaya clean. Thank you very much, and thank you, Professor Krishna, for providing this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Pathak, for your excellent presentation. You want to stop sharing the presentation and take a look at chat box for questions?